Welcome to Get Real, How to Live a More Authentic Life, with psychologist and author of over 75 books, Dr. Barry Weinhold. Hello, everybody, and welcome back to Get Real, How to Live a More Authentic Life with Dr. Barry Weinhold. My name is Ben Barber. Dr. Weinhold, Barry, how are you today?
I'm grateful as usual.
Excellent, excellent. You look good. I like that shirt.
Yeah, that's my color.
It is. It's really nice.
I had my colors done once. What they do is they put you in front of a mirror and they drape various colored fabrics across your front, and then they look at what colors enlighten and cause more life in your face to show up, and ones that kind of dull your face. So I've got certain colors that I wear because they were shown to do the best job of brightening me up.
I think that for me it's just black, apparently.
Oh yeah, right.
Whatever. I'm sure, but that's very interesting. I would love to get that done sometime.
Yeah, this person who I knew that designed clothing for people.
That's awesome.
She was the one who ran me through my colors and then put swatches of those colors on a thing I could take with me when I went shopping.
That is the coolest part, I think, that she put those. Okay, wow. All right. Well, I need to tame my shame around putting colors on my body, and let's go do this. And I will get my colors done and follow your lead, Dr. Weinhold. So what are we talking about today? We've been working through your book, What is Your PsyQ? Increasing Your Psychological Intelligence Through Self-Therapy. Well, what are we talking about today?
We're going to do item 2 on the self-inventory, self-quiz. It's called Taming Your Shame.
Excellent. I'm excited.
And what it says under that, the description is, the most destructive inner demon is the one that shames you. Usually when you screw up. So you have to realize that there's nothing wrong with you, and that your inner demons that you listen to are totally wrong. So when you screw up, it's an opportunity to learn something new about yourself that you hadn't learned before. This was a big one for me. I had a lot of self-criticism that I had to kind of deal with. And when I screw up, that self-criticism would come to the surface. And I would say, why'd you do that, Barry? That's so stupid, or something similar to that. And I've stopped it. I stopped it entirely. I don't do that anymore. And how did I do that? Just by consciously being aware that I was doing it, and knowing that it wasn't true, and knowing that, screwing up, another term for it is learning. If you go that route, you can say there's really no such things as mistakes. It's just learning new things. And anytime you do something that turns out different from the way you had thought it would turn out, instead of calling it a mistake, you can call it, oh, this is an opportunity to learn something new about myself. And so that's what I'd done. And I feel pretty good about that I was able to, with some consciousness, change that pretty quickly. I had it for years, and I found myself, almost habitually, every time something happened that I defined as I screwed up, that I would go into this litany about myself. And how could you do that, Barry? You know better than that. And, yada, yada, yada. All those things that you say to yourself when you're listening to that inner demon that said, there must be something wrong with you. Well, if you don't believe there's anything wrong with you, then why do that? Why engage in that kind of self-talk? And so I basically nailed it and stopped it. And so today I'm going to look at what are your core beliefs that control your thoughts, your behavior, and your feelings. And because you have core beliefs that are usually formed before the age of 10, if those are not in your awareness, they're not part of the 5% that you're aware of, but they're part of the 95% that's in your subconscious or unconscious, they could be controlling your life in ways that you have basically you feel like you have no control over. And in fact, it's one of the common things I hear from my clients is, gee, I wish I had more control over my life. It seems to just happen to me. And that's a sign that basically they're dealing with shame. And shame means that there is something wrong with me. Guilt is different. Guilt is I did something wrong. But shame is much more deeper and it's much more pervasive, I think. We live with shame and we don't know too much about how to deal with it because nobody focuses on it. But it really is something that when you feel shame and you don't know what to do with it, the most common thing that people do is they project it on somebody else. They, instead of looking at their own shame, they act towards somebody like you're shaming somebody else for something they're doing. And that's a common kind of thing that happens in our daily world, and it explains a lot if you understand that. Because most of political behavior is shame based with projections. So I have this colleague who is the opposite of me politically. So anytime I say anything that is he perceives as negative towards his approach, he immediately says he looks for an equivalent, somebody that believes more like me who did something similar. And that's a way of deflecting the shame, a way of not taking it in and saying, gee, let me look at that and see what that's all about. So it's really a way of keeping yourself stuck with this belief that there's something wrong with me and I can't change, which is a stuck place, obviously. So I believe that also, if you've ever gone to therapy, uh, the first thing they did when they saw you was to give you a diagnosis, which gives you a name for what's wrong with you. And now you have a name for your flaw, and in the way people think about shame is shame is something I cannot change. It's a fundamental flaw in my behavior, my personality, and that's just not true. And so the first thing I try to do with my clients is get them past the shame barrier. And I do very simple things to start with. I just talk to them and say, listen, I know that you're, particularly if they've been in therapy before, I asked them if they got a diagnosis and they said they did, yes. And I said, well, I'm not going to diagnose you because I don't think there's anything wrong with you. I don't think you need to be diagnosed with any kind of mental disorder. And they kind of look at me like nobody ever told me that before, particularly a therapist. And then I also go on to then talk to them about what I do that is different from treating them as somebody who's shamed, and and that kind of orientation I use at the very beginning goes a long way as I work with people in getting them free from that whole idea of there's something wrong with me and I'm ashamed of my behavior. So it really does give me the opportunity uh, to try to break free of that. And I find when I do that and people can break free of their shame barrier, we make much faster progress in doing whatever they need to do. So it's a barrier that gets in the way. Uh, And shame can operate a lot of different ways in our lives. Uh, I don't know if you remember, there was an experiment, a psychological experiment by Daniel Milgram, and it was called obedience to authority. It could have been, I could have talked about it last time, but it fits here too. Is basically they had a person who administered shock, and there was progressive levels of shock they would administer, and they had a laboratory assistant there with a white coat on, telling them that this is an experiment, and we need you to do exactly what you're told in this experiment, or you will ruin the experiment. And so the fear was that there'd be something wrong with me, and I'll ruin the experiment. But anyway, in the experiment, what they found was that about 60 or 70% of the subjects, because of their obedience to authority and their shame, uh, did exactly what the instructor and the lab assistant told them to do. Even and the other side of this partition, they had this subject who was supposedly receiving the shock, and of course, it was not set up that way. There was no shock being administered, but the other person was like an actor and acted as if they were getting shocked. And so the early shock, they would say, "Oh, that jolted me." And then as the shock got more intense with more voltage, then their reaction would be more extreme. And 60 to 70% of the subjects administered the maximum amount of shock to the subjects, which in likelihood would have been lethal. But they did that because they were told to do it by a man in a white coat, an authority. And also because they would be ashamed to have somehow done something that ruined the experiment. And that was a very interesting experiment, and showed us a lot about why people are people pleasers, as I talked about last week. Uh, so anyway, shame is I've kind of decided to take a couple of different approaches to it. One of them, I have a self quiz which you can put up on the screen, Ben, and it's a list of the uh, 30 most common shame-based beliefs about yourself. Uh, I have to be perfect in order to be loved by others. This is the first one, and and what I do is I ask my clients to fill out this again using the 4-point scale of from down to almost never to uh, almost always. And so then we look at what are the items that are most where you scored a 3 or a 4. And I use the 4-step method again. So again, this is an opportunity for people to process through their shame. And again, the 4-step methods, how does that belief affect your life today? And then where did it come from? Do you have any ideas about where you started to feel this way? And what was missing? And then what can you do now to correct that and remove the shame that you're having with that? So it really is a way of getting to the core of what this belief is. And this core belief, another person called it a default setting that we have, that when we grow up, and it isn't necessarily what we experienced, it's what we came to believe because of the experience we had. So it is really these core beliefs then control our behavior. So basically, understanding that to start with is a way of deconstructing the old belief and constructing a new belief in its place. And so, what I do frequently is I will help people look at what do you think might be the old uh, core belief that is still a shame based belief. and most people can come up with something. They have, particularly when they've done this self inventory here, they have some ideas about what are the most common shame-based beliefs, and which ones did they identify with. And then we look at what the effect of that is, how to deal with it, and how to change it. So the other thing I do is I ask them to say, okay, if they can state the core negative shame-based belief, what would be another belief that would be the exact opposite of that? One that could support you outside of a shame-based existence. And that's what we then try to strengthen. And I have people sometimes do affirmations, and I use a different style of affirmations than most people use. I have them take a piece of paper, draw a line down the middle, and on the left side they write the shame-based belief they have, and then on the right side they write the opposite of that. That would be an affirmation that would cancel out that one. And then after they've done that, they wait and they see if any negative self-talk comes up about, well, that can't be true. And so then you write down the negative thoughts that came up. And then you look at those and see if you can change them into a positive belief. And you keep going back and forth each time you get noise about why this isn't true. When you put down the positive belief, you try to change that to be a positive until you reach a statement where there's no negative belief to go with it. No negative belief comes up after you write it. And that's the one that I ask people to use and maybe post in their bathroom or in the kitchen, and repeat it a number of times during the day. And it takes usually about 30 days for that new belief to start to kick in. And then I also ask them about what would their life be like if they were able to operate out of this new belief, to give them a vision of what this is really going to do for them. And I think that helps them motivate them into doing it. So some of the beliefs that, like, I have an OCD client who stated this way: I believe I need to control all of my actions, or something bad will happen to me or someone I love. And they are totally controlled by obsessive thoughts. And it's all shame based. And yet they really have a hard time dealing with life because they take any situation and they look at the worst possible thing that could happen if they don't do certain things obsessively or compulsively. And I mean, the kind of typical obsessive compulsive is the hand washer who can't get their hands clean. And actually, one of my clients who has this OCD remembers back in preschool, he went to Catholic schools, and in a Catholic preschool, there was a nun who was a hand washer and was constantly getting all the kids to wash their hands repeatedly. She was a germophobic. And I mean, he came home and his parents saw that his hands were all broken out from having washed them so many times during the day. And they tried to get the teacher to stop doing it, but she didn't. And so he now, as an adult, has this obsessive compulsive disorder where it's not a hand washing thing, it's about his thoughts. If he thinks something will happen, he's afraid it will happen. And he tries to engage in counter rituals that keep him from having to think about the worst place scenario. And so the idea of the shame-based belief is one of moving out of kind of the core beliefs that relate to shame, and then looking at how you can basically change those beliefs by deconstructing the old ones and constructing new ones in its place. Those are more cognitive behavioral skills, but I don't use those until I have determined where this shame started and understand the process in which they integrated and started to believe that there was something wrong with them. And so that's how I work with shame and beliefs, and so that basically is how I suggest that you who are interested and notice that you have some shame-based beliefs after you've taken this inventory. I suggest all of you take this. This is the 30 most common shame-based beliefs that I found, and see how many of them you identify with either a 3 or a 4, meaning they're usually there or almost all the time. And then begin to use the 4-step method. That's the first one you can do. Or you can begin to use the protocol where you draw a line in the middle of the page and write down the shame-based belief on one side, and then write down its opposite on the other, and continue to process back and forth until you reach a statement that no longer, causes any negative thoughts and beliefs to show up. So that's what I do with taming your shame, Ben.
I love it. It's it's very difficult to do, right? It's some of this work that anything that is shame-based work is hard for the individual to do because there's so much to overcome, right? Like,
Well, it's not that it's overcome, but people. I mean, the first step is realizing you have shame-based beliefs, and many people don't even get to that stage. They have shame, but they project it on others, and they never. It's almost like I kind of look at it as somebody hits you in the back, and the first impulse is to point towards somebody else and get rid of the feeling of shame. And
yeah,
that's what happens if shame comes and grabs you because you do something that either somebody else says is shameful or you think is shameful. Your immediate response is, how can I get rid of this feeling?
right,
How can I project this on somebody else so that I don't have to feel it?
right.
So the first step is owning it and feeling it.
Yeah.
And that's hard. That is the hardest part. And
The hardest part's always usually the first step, isn't it?
yeah, the journey of 1,000 miles always begins with the first step.
Absolutely. Do you have any sort of a preview as to what next month is going to offer for us?
I want to dig in further to some of the other items on the self quiz, and
Excellent.
give you some tools and some tips on how to if you find yourself low in any of those, how you
Perfect.
can improve your intelligence, your psychological intelligence.
Well, click the link and go to circle.org to pick up the new book, What is Your PsyQ? Increasing Your Psychological Intelligence Through Self-Therapy. You can also use that link to get all of the resources, the 200-page workbook that goes along with this, and of course, the self-quiz on shame-based beliefs that we did today, and all of the resources that we've ever talked about in the podcast. They're all there. Click the link, circle.org. I hope, Barry, that between now and the next time I get to talk to you, that you do some more fly fishing, and because I know how much that makes you happy. And thank you so much. It's been wonderful as always to sit under the learning tree.
Well, it's fly fishing soothes my soul.
Excellent. Well, I'm glad that something does so that you can keep educating the rest of us. So for Barry Weinhold, Dr. Barry Weinhold, I'm Ben Barber. Bye for now.
And thank you, Ben.
Thank you. For more information, please visit the Colorado Institute for Conflict Resolution and Creative Leadership at CICRCL.org or click the link in the show notes.